Welcome to the Jedi Ranger. I'm JohnBerry555, and today I'm going to be reviewing Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. So if you haven't seen it, I have been rewatching and re-reviewing all the Star Wars films. I started with Rogue One after completing Star Wars Andor, and I continued with the original trilogy from there. And now we are at Return of the Jedi. So this Star Wars film is actually quite special to me. This is actually the first Star Wars film I ever got to see. So you can imagine there's some stuff that was spoiled for me by the time I actually watched the rest of the Star Wars films that were out at the time. And also, something like, oh, okay, whatever, because I like the context, like, why was it, a big deal that Vader was Luke's father besides the fact that they were on opposing sides of a galactic conflict? A lot of the stuff like that, I just didn't have the context for. But you know what? I got hooked on Star Wars and I've been a fan ever since. But let's really take a look at the film in different parts. First, let's address probably the biggest elephant in the room. And what's that, you may ask? That's going to be the special edition changes. So there's really, I would say, 1, 2, 3, 4 changes. 2 in the Jabba's Palace and 2 at the end that I want to discuss. In Jabba's Palace, they actually, as I understand it, refilmed some of the scenes specifically for the character Ola, for dancing and all that, and visiting Jabba going down to the Rancor pit. As I understand, they refilmed some of those scenes to expand it in. That stuff is perfect. You can hardly tell. But it's the musical stuff going on that changes. They, I believe, changed the song and introducing CGI characters that have not held up very well, at least on my screen. That's Slice Noodles, who I never liked as a character. Even her appearance in the Clone Wars, I did not like. Her design is alien in a way that does not seem like it. It's not a good alien design in my opinion, and I just don't like it. The CGI on her holds up better. It's that other kind of almost cockroach-like creature that his CGI does not hold up well at all, and it does kind of take you out of the moment, both those things. The music itself is actually not too bad, it's just the CGI they use doing that sequence is not great. And then the ending of the film, they changed Yub Yub to the Victory Celebration, and I really do like that change. Yub Yub was fine, but Victory Celebration seems bigger in scale and puts the rebellion into a wider context. By showing other planets besides Endor celebrating the defeat of the Emperor, it tells us, the audience, that the rebellion was not isolated. They were a big galaxy-wide movement. It has more impact, I think, on the story and more of a sense of finality to the rebels' victory. Yes, we know both in canon legends the war did continue and all that, but that's more of a side point. The point is that at this point, it's showing that the Empire's time was over. On Palpatine's homeworld of Naboo, people were celebrating. Gungan clearly says Misa free, which is, for the Gungans, they've been kind of struggling for a long time for, their freedoms and all that. Things had started to improve, but things went south once the Empire took control. You had, Tatooine, which probably not as oppressed as some other worlds, definitely was feeling the boot of the Imperial Stormtrooper, as we saw in A New Hope. So we got celebrations there. We get to see Coruscant, and of course this was after the prequels when that change, I believe, was made. But that you got people celebrating on the capital of the Empire, including, if you pay attention, there's a Stormtrooper that's being carried by the crowd and likely to be thrown off a ledge. In fact, if I remember correctly, in Star Wars Return of the Jedi, from a certain point of view, Dexter Jettster's story, I believe, actually addresses that and how he tried to save the Stormtrooper because, very much more of, hey, we defeat them, we don't need to punch them any farther kind of mentality. I don't know if he actually succeeds in that. But the point I want to get there is not only like on Coruscant, where it's likely more than just a celebration, but a popular uprising, showing that the Empire is defeated. Not only was the super weapon and the Emperor killed, but people were rising up. Really great way of book ending and showing that the fight against the tyranny, or authoritarianism, and fascism of the Empire was defeated, and that they were done for. There was no way they could recover. And going back to the song itself, the song itself is more, I would say, almost melancholy. It's still a celebration, but you can definitely tell, like, we defeated the Empire, but no, we had costs, we had sacrifices. There's more of a melancholy to it. Well, yep, it was great and all, or even compared to how A New Hope ended, the celebration seemed more triumphant, not that sense of melancholy, because yes, Vader was redeemed, but he had no chance to act on his redemption besides saving Luke. We have several other things as well, people who were lost and all that. And so those are just things that I feel like Victory Celebration emotionally conveys better than Yup had ever done. Of course, that is not all. And thanks to Star Wars Rebels, a very popular fan theory came about that Captain Rex was the old rebel on Endor. While Forces of Destiny did kind of go that route, my headcanon is that the character from Legends, Nick Sant, who is basically a parody of St. Nicholas in terms of naming, and Rex are two separate characters who joke that they look vaguely similar to each other, and that they were both for Endor, but they were having different missions. That Rex's mission was more after the fact, bringing reinforcements down to help mop up the remaining Imperial forces on the planet. That's my headcanon there, but that's actually a great thing about Star Wars in general, is we do name a lot of background characters, but sometimes we don't, and sometimes we do in such a way that we can create fun headcanons, like how we got fake Wedge in The New Hope because of some interesting behind-the-scenes casting things, which I think was phenomenal, and I wish they would do that same thing with Nick Sant and with Captain Rex, because I just love that kind of funness there in the storytelling. But we really should be talking about the actual film. I've spent over 7 minutes now talking about changes and all that kind of stuff, and not the actual story of the film. And so I really want you to focus on Luke Skywalker. His story here is about him becoming a Jedi. The film is called Return of the Jedi after all. And the first thing I want you to focus on in that is Luke throughout most of the film is wearing an all-black tunic. And for me, that is symbolizing the darkness that's inside of Luke, but also the darkness that is surrounding him, that is the threat, the conflict that he needs to overcome, the obstacle, in order to actually become a Jedi. And then we have Yoda's line to Luke that in order to become a Jedi, he must confront Vader, confront his father. Luke did need to convince Yoda to confirm that Vader is Luke's father. But I do want you to take a note and point out that the film uses the word confront. Not fight, not defeat, confront. Which I think is kind of telling. I think in both Obi-Wan and in Yoda's mind, that was confront as in fight a duel with Vader and defeat him. But the Force, the true confrontation for Luke to become a Jedi is to confront Vader and resist the pull of the dark side while also drawing Vader back to the light, drawing Anakin Skywalker back. That's Luke confronting Vader, confronting the dark side, and he overcame it. He did not succumb to it, did not let it control him. Now, and then to symbolize that visually to us, the audience, Luke Skywalker, after that duel, his tunic is partially pulled back, revealing the white interior. The light is now peeking through. And yes, in both Legends and in canon, Luke still struggled with the dark side, and the dark side was not fully defeated after confronting Vader and the Emperor. However, in my judgment, that's a minor thing, because especially when George Lucas was making Return of the Jedi, the story was about Luke confronting the dark side and resisting it, not about him defeating the dark side once and for all. Yes, the dark side will always be defeated. That is the ultimate message of Star Wars. The sequels do reiterate that, and also so do many stories in Legends. But for this story itself, Anakin, he doesn't need to be the chosen one. He chooses to save his son. That's why, that's what redeems him. He chooses the path of love and compassion rather than hate and fear in that moment. He chooses to save someone. That's the Jedi thing. And while, yes, attachments are brought up vaguely in the original trilogy when talking about the Jedi, not like they were in in the prequel trilogy, and that's partially because the story being told is a different story. The sequel is focused on the fall. Here it's focusing on someone becoming a Jedi, and that involves, being compassionate and saving others, but also maybe recognizing when is the right time to save others. Han, Leia, Chewie, they were all been fine no matter what happened in The Empire Strikes Back. Luke did not need to be there to save them. They saved him, thankfully. Well, Lando, because Han was in carbonite. But the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that when you look at the story being told, we don't need to concern that what happens next. All we need to be concerned about is Luke faced the dark side and remained in the light and became a Jedi for it, while also redeeming his father, confronting Vader, and finding the true Jedi outcome. Something the Jedi of the prequels have lost sight of for various reasons, and we'll probably talk about that in a later video. But there is more to discuss. We also have Han and Leia's story, so continuing their romance, which, while not as apparent in terms of the narrative as it was in The Empire Strikes Back, here I feel was done much better. That I partially chalk up to the fact that they already set up that they have romantic feelings for each other, so now it just needs to be cemented. And what I really liked how they did that is during the Battle of Endor, Leia does get a grazing wound on her shoulder, and Han's taking a look at it, and two Imperial troopers come up, and Han can tell her that Leia has her blaster ready to go, and Han says, "I love you," because seeing that, very much his thing to do, and Leia responds, "I know," and then shoots the stormtroopers. That's not, the shooting stormtroopers part is not necessarily the romantic part, but the fact that it's rhyming with Leia's confession of her love to Han from Empire Strikes Back, and this time it's Han properly confessing it himself. And that's why both of them said, "I know," in their different circumstances. I think that is beautiful and very great poetry, and shows that they do very much know each other. And then later on, Leia does tell Han that Luke is Leia's sister, because they needed to clear that up, because Han was a little bit jealous right there. Hey, we know eventually in timeline, both Kanan and Legends will have a Jedi as his brother-in-law, so there's that. There's also the murder teddy bears, the Ewoks, and I gotta say, they were going to eat our heroes. They were. And if not for basically Luke force levitating C-3PO, it would have happened. And we learn actually more context from a certain point of view of why the Ewoks are reverent to C-3PO, because he vaguely resembles one of the gods known as the Golden One. And that's just some additional context the books bring in, but it's a very fun context to bring in. And honestly, the Ewoks is there. They're brutal to the Empire. I caught this time on my watch through. They literally, during when the scenes were beating up stormtroopers, they cracked the stormtroopers' armor, which, yes, for filming purposes, I'm pretty sure was made of plastic, but in universe is plastoid, which is like a super sturdy plastic that it can block projectiles. Don't get on the wrong side of Ewoks, since they can break something that apparently projectiles can't break. Yeah, they're brutal. And not to mention, at the end, during Victory Celebration, they're drumming on stormtrooper helmets. What happened to the stormtroopers? What happened to the Imperials? They probably tried to eat them. At least in Forces of Destiny, Leia did stop some stormtroopers from getting eaten by giving Ewoks rations, but could she have stopped them all? I'm not so sure. And yeah, some war souvenirs too from fallen troopers and all that. But I guarantee you, the Ewoks would have eaten the Imperials. And they probably did. Do not get on the Ewoks' bad side. Do not. And the Ewok Hunt battle mode, game mode in Star Wars Battlefront 2 is brutal. I literally played it last night, and I was the second to last stormtrooper surviving. I don't know how. I was running along the perimeter of the map. I think that's the only reason why. I kept on moving. The stormtroopers lost the Ewoks won, which is a good thing, but they were scary. And that mode is hard because, yeah, the Ewoks have the advantage there. But I bring all this up to say, Ewoks, people make fun of them. Do not make fun of them. I love how how especially more recent stories are leaning into the fact that they're basically murderous teddy bears. Go for that. I love it. But before I end my review, I do want to address another thing as well. I vaguely touched on Vader's redemption, but I want to emphasize, Vader's redemption was not because he destroyed the Sith, fulfilling some chosen one prophecy which may have been misread. Let's remember that. But he was redeemed, he was brought back to life because he chose compassion. He chose not to be a slave to the darkness and chose to save his son. The only person alive who believed that there was still good in him, who believed he could turn from the dark side and redeem himself, which is very much also like Padme. And I think that there is what's the true important thing, is that two people in Anakin's life believed there was still good in him. And if those two people didn't, especially with Luke, because he actually got Vader redeemed, Anakin would have died as Darth Vader, not become Anakin Skywalker once again. Now, we can get into, is Anakin Vader one person or two people, split personality type thing? Vader thinks so, Palpatine wants to think so, and Obi-Wan Kenobi definitely thinks so, but Padme doesn't, Luke doesn't, I don't think Yoda does as well. My personal headcanon is that Vader, Anakin, is trying to separate the Anakin who should have always been from Vader, from the darkness, the Anakin that became Vader. And actually, Force Ghost Anakin is that Anakin who never experienced the dark side. Yes, he has those memories and all that, as we can actually see in his appearance in Ahsoka, but especially in the context of Return of the Jedi, that is Anakin if he was never corrupted by the dark side, never had Palpatine whispering in his ear. He would have been probably still very reckless at times, and probably still willing to push the line, but some of his more authoritarian fascistic tendencies that we saw in the prequels before he became Vader would likely be because of Palpatine whispering in his ear, corrupting him. This is not like a serious situation. This is a slightly different situation because he's a different character and has a different role in said story. And I think a big part of that is Vader was corrupted. Anakin was corrupted into Vader. Still one person, but trying to disassociate and create almost that split personality. But Anakin was always in there. The Anakin who was always supposed to be was still in there. And in that personality that was always in him, finally gained the strength to act to save his son, to save Luke from the Emperor. And that there is why Vader was redeemed in the narrative. Because he made the right choice. Not because of destiny, not because of anything, but because his inner goodness took action. It finally said, enough was enough, we have to do the right thing, we're not going to let fear control us anymore. And he wins and gets redeemed. But those are just my thoughts on all of this. There's a lot more to discuss about Return of the Jedi, so the comment section down below will be open, so let's continue discussion on there. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to give this video a like and share. Also, consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date on all my latest content. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and as always, have a good day, a good night, wherever you are. May the Force be with you, always.